The heating vent in my workshop had carried sound up from that kitchen for 31 years. Ellen used to lean over it and call down when supper was ready, and I could tell her mood by the pitch of her voice before I ever climbed the stairs. That Sunday afternoon, the vent carried my daughter instead, and what it carried was this. "The house goes first," Carla said, "before it needs a new roof. He won't fight us on it. He can barely keep the yard up anymore." I had come down for a level to true up the porch rail. I stopped with my hand flat on the workbench. The one I built the week Ryan was born, and I did not move. "What about out here?" That was Nathan, quieter, the way he's been quiet his whole life. "The workshop. He practically lives in it." "That's the point," Ryan said. "It's a liability. Old wiring, no permits. We clear it out, take down the building, and the lot's worth more empty than it is with a shed full of a dead man's tools." A dead man's tools. I was standing in the middle of them. My heart was still beating. My hands still worked. And my oldest son had already put me in the past tense. Then he said the thing I have not been able to set down since. He's 63 going on 80. He won't know the difference in a year or two anyway. We get ahead of it now while it's simple. They laughed. Not cruelly, which was the part that took the wind out of me. They laughed the easy way you laugh about something already decided, that only needed a little tidying before it was done. I want to tell you that I threw open the door and put a stop to it. I didn't. Something in me went very still, the way a man goes still on a ladder when he feels it start to slide. I set the level down without a sound, and I listened. "The piano is Mom's," Carla went on. "I'm taking that. Don't argue with me about the piano." "Nobody's arguing about the piano," Ryan said. "I'm talking about the Prescott duplex. That's the real money. That's rent coming in every month. Just sitting in his account doing nothing." "It's not doing nothing," Nathan said. "It's his—" "For now," Ryan said. "For now." Two small words dropped on the table like loose change. I turned them over in the dark of that workshop and could not find the bottom of them. Let me back up, because a moment like that doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes at the end of a long road you didn't know you were walking. I met Ellen when I was 24, hanging drywall for her father. We bought the house on Marin Street on a down payment borrowed against my truck. I spent 40 years as a finished carpenter, the man they called at the end of the job, when the trim had to look like it had always been there. It never made us rich, but we paid that house off a board at a time, put 3 children through school, and somewhere in the middle I bought a small duplex on Prescott and rented it out. That building put Nathan through his last year of college, and was going to let me grow old without holding my hand out to anyone. Ellen died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Quick, which everyone tells you is a mercy until it happens to you. After the funeral, the kids came around more, and I let myself believe it was grief pulling us close again. Some of it was. But grief thins out, and their visits didn't. They only changed shape. Ryan is my oldest, 41 now, certain since birth that he understood the world better than anyone already in it. He runs a contracting outfit that always seems one big job away from turning the corner. After Ellen passed, he started asking about my money, never directly. Did I have things organized? Did I have a plan? Wouldn't it be simpler to keep everything in one account? I told him I'd managed my own affairs since before he could walk, and he laughed and let it go, then brought up at Christmas and again in the spring. Carla is 37, married to a man with a boat and a mortgage to match. She keeps a spotless house and a careful smile, and she loves you the way you love a piece of furniture you grew up with, real feeling laced with a quiet certainty that one day it will be hers to move where she likes. And Nathan, 33, still finding the shape of his life, the only one who calls just to talk. He was the one at that table saying it's his while his brother and sister measured me for the ground. Eventually I climbed the stairs, arranged my face into something ordinary, and walked into my own kitchen to ask if anyone wanted coffee. I watched 3 grown adults rearrange themselves around a lie. Carla slid a folder off the table into her bag, smooth as a card trick. Ryan clapped me on the shoulder and told me I looked tired, that maybe I was taking on too much. "You ought to let us carry some of this for you, Dad," he said, and gave me the smile Ellen used to call his salesman face. I told him that was kind. I poured the coffee. My hands didn't shake, and I was almost proud of that. The way you're proud of a small thing when the large things have gone out from under you. They left before dark. I sat in Ellen's chair by the window and tried to talk myself back down. It was just talk, the careless kind grown children fall into when a parent's out of room. People say things they don't mean. I very nearly got there. Then I went to the desk to pay the water bill, the way I do the first Sunday of every month. The duplex papers live in the second drawer, in a green folder Ellen labeled in her own round hand. I opened it to check the account number, and the deed wasn't there. In its place, clipped where the deed should have been, was a form I'd never seen before. Across the top it read, "Transfer on death designation." And on the line at the bottom, in blue ballpoint that was not my ink and not my hand, someone had begun to write my name. I didn't touch it. I stood over that open drawer a long time, the way you stand over something in the road that might still be alive. I knew enough about those forms to feel cold. You sign one, file it with the county, and when you die, whatever it names passes straight to the person on the line. No will, no probate. It skips everything and everyone. My name was started on it in a stranger's writing, and the space of the beneficiary was empty, waiting, like a chair pulled out for a guest who hadn't arrived. I closed the drawer. I paid the water bill from memory, because I couldn't make my eyes read the numbers. And then I did the thing Ellen would have wanted first. I asked myself, honestly, whether I was being a foolish old man. She was always the one who talked me down off the roof. She'd have reminded me that Ryan prints 100 forms a week and leaves them everywhere, that Carla can't sit in a room without organizing it. That may be one of them, meaning, well, had started getting my affairs in order and hadn't asked first. Grief makes people clumsy. Love makes them presume. I've been guilty of both. So I made myself go back over the last few years the way I'd walk a job that failed inspection, looking for the exact place the framing went out of square. And once I started looking, the small things stopped being small. The consolidation talk, over and over, gentle and patient. The questions that weren't questions. Carla asking who my lawyer was these days while she dried a dish. Ryan wondering aloud what Prescott would praise for now that the neighborhood had turned. And last fall, the afternoon my Social Security card went missing from the fireproof box in my closet, only to reappear 3 weeks later tucked behind the birth certificates as if it had never left. I'd told myself I'd overlooked it. Standing at that desk, I stopped being sure. And there was the lunch last winter, just the two of us, where Ryan spent an hour on a friend whose father had waited too long and let the state take everything. The smart move, he said, was to sign things over early while you're still sharp, so nobody could say later you were confused. He watched me when he said the word confused. I didn't notice it then. I noticed it now. I didn't sleep that night. Around 4, I made coffee and did something I should have done years before. I sat with a legal pad and wrote out, in plain figures, everything I owned. The house, free and clear. The duplex, free and clear. It's 2 units bringing in a little over $2,000 a month. A savings account holding 40 years of not spending. A modest pension. What was left of Ellen's life insurance. Most of it untouched because spending it felt like spending her. It came more than I had ever let myself say out loud. Enough, I understood, to be worth taking. By morning, I had made a decision that felt at the time like nothing more than good housekeeping. I would gather every document I had, the deeds, the statements, the will Ellen and I signed 15 years ago, the insurance, all of it, and put it in one place, my place, so I knew exactly what I held and exactly who could reach it. I started with the will. We'd signed 2 copies at a lawyer's office downtown. One lived in the desk. The other was in our safe deposit box at 3rd Federal. And the key to that box has written on the same ring as my truck keys for 20 years. I drove over when the bank opened. A young teller walked me back to the vault, then stopped at her screen with a small frown. Mr. Howerin. It shows the box was accessed back in March. Was it you? The signature for that visit doesn't quite match the one you just gave me. I asked, as evenly as I could, to see it. She hesitated, decided I was who I said, and turned the screen. A visit logged the 9th of March, beside a signature that swooped where mine sits flat and dotted letters mine never bothers with. Somebody had walked into my bank, signed my name badly enough that a stranger could see it 4 months later, and been led into the one place I keep the things that matter. Who authorized this? I asked. She checked. The box had carried 2 names for years, mine and Ellen's, and I'd never taken Ellen off. But at some point, the record wasn't clear when a 3rd person had been added as a deputy, free to come and go. The paperwork would be in my file, she said, and she'd need a manager to pull it. I asked her to pull everything and make copies. Then I opened the box. The will was there, both copies. Ellen's writing on the envelope. Nothing was missing that I could see, but something had been moved. Ellen kept her mother's rosary coiled in the front corner, and now it lay stretched across the papers, off to the side, the careless way you leave a thing you picked up to look underneath and set back down without thinking. Someone had gone through my box. Someone had put their hands on her rosary, and I did not yet know what they had been looking for. I drove home the long way, past the duplex on Prescott, because I needed to see something of mine still standing. Betty Kramer has rented the downstairs unit with her husband Frank for 9 years. Good, quiet tenants who pay on the first. Betty was on the porch with a watering can and waved me down before I'd fully stopped the truck. Mr. Howerin, I'm glad you came by. I meant to call. She came to my window, lowering her voice as if the flowers might carry it. Your son Ryan stopped in a few weeks back, said you were fixing to sell, and asked when our lease is up and whether we'd think about leaving early. We were so sorry. Is it true? Are you selling? I told her nothing was decided, that Ryan had gotten ahead of himself, that she and Frank shouldn't lose a wink of sleep. She looked relieved. I felt the opposite. He hadn't been idly speculating at my table. He'd been to my bank. He'd been to my tenant. This wasn't a conversation. It was already in motion, and I was the last one to hear the engine start. That was the day I stopped being a man who couldn't believe it and started being one quietly gathering proof. I'd learned something from that event. As long as they believed I saw nothing, they would keep showing me everything. So I gave them what they expected. A step slower, a beat behind. Once or twice I said, "Now, what was that again?" and watched a small satisfaction settle over Ryan's face, the look of a man whose diagnosis has been confirmed. It cost me something. A father spent his whole life trying to seem strong to his children. Pretending to be weak in front of them is its own kind of grief. Inside, I went to work. I found a lawyer who'd drawn up our will, a woman named Patricia Okafor, still practicing downtown. She remembered Ellen. I gave her the plain version over the phone, and she told me to come in and to bring whatever the bank gave me. She was near my own age, careful, the kind who let the silence do half her talking. She read the form twice, once against the window light, then folded her hands. "The only good news I have for you today is that this was never filed," she said. "It's a draft. Somebody printed it, started your signature, and stopped, probably because a form like this has to be signed in front of a notary, and they couldn't get you to one without you reading it. Understand what it does. A transfer on death designation on your rental would pull that property clean out of your will. Whoever's name went on that empty line would own it the day you died, whatever you and Ellen ever wanted. And this is a polite version. The one that worries me is a power of attorney. Have you signed one?" I told her I didn't think so. People sign them without knowing, in a stack of other papers at a kitchen table, handed over by someone they love who says it's only just in case. She looked at me until I understood she'd watched this happen 100 times. Find out. That's the document that lets a person act as you while you're still alive and sitting in the room. She told me what to do and what not to do. Don't confront anyone. Don't sign anything. Don't move money in a way that looks strange. because people trying to prove you can't think will call anything unusual evidence. Gather, document, come back when I knew more. I didn't have to wait long. That very week, Ryan handed me the answer himself. He came by Thursday evening with a folder, green, the same shade as Ellen's, a pen already uncapped, and a story ready to go. He'd been talking to a fellow, he said, about protecting the house from nursing home costs, and there was a form we should both sign, so the bills wouldn't eat through everything I'd built. He spread 3 pages out and kept his thumb near the top, so the heading stayed half-covered, talking fast and warm about protecting my legacy and how the Smart families handled this early. Just initial here, he said, and sign at the bottom. It's nothing, Dad, just so I can step in and help if you ever can't. I put on my glasses and picked up the pen, and did the only clever thing I'd managed in years. I let my hand hover, frown, and asked him, slow and a little lost, to explain it one more time, because I wasn't following. He sighed and started over, and while he talked, I read every word under his thumb. The top sheet was a durable power of attorney. The date typed above my signature line was 3 days before he'd walked through my door. He hadn't drawn it up that afternoon. He'd had it for days, waiting for the right evening to slide it in front of a tired man who trusted him. I set the pen down, let my hand tremble a little more than it needed to, and told him the word swam when I read too long, that I'd get to it when my head was clearer. He folded the pages back into the green folder, and for a second before he smoothed it over, I saw something I'd never seen aimed at me by one of my own children. Not anger, impatience. The impatience of a man looking at an obstacle. Sure, Dad, he said. No rush. We'll do it when you're feeling sharper. When I was feeling sharper, that became the new music of my family. And once I'd heard it, I heard it everywhere. Over the next 2 weeks, my children discovered they were worried about me. Carla began calling every morning at 9, not to talk but to check. Did I eat? Did I take my pill? I take 1 pill for blood pressure and have for 11 years without a reminder. She'd make little notes on her phone while I talked, and said she liked to keep track of things for me. Then one afternoon in front of Ryan, she said, Dad told me the same story twice last week, a story I'd never told, and I understood a record was being built, and whether the events in it were true did not matter at all. Ryan took up my driving. The neighbors had mentioned I'd been slow at the stop sign on Marin. There are no such neighbors, because I drive that street like a man who hasn't clipped a mailbox in 40 years. But he said it gently, a hand on my arm, and that was the whole trick of it. Every knife came wrapped in a blanket. We only want you safe. We only want to take the weight off. We only want to be sure nobody takes advantage of you. Dad, at your age, I'll tell you the part that frightens me even now. It nearly worked. When 3 people who love you tell you, softly, every day that you're slipping, some part of you starts testing the floor for ice. I caught myself pausing before I spoke, wondering if I'd already said a thing, apologizing for mistakes I hadn't made. A man can be talked out of his own mind if the people doing the talking are the people he raised. What kept me standing was a 16-year-old girl. Emily is Carla's daughter, my granddaughter, and the only one in that family who has ever talked to me like I'm a man and not an inheritance. She came by that Saturday to do her laundry because her mother's machine was acting up, a reason, I later understood, invented to get her out of the house while the adults talked. She perched on the workshop stool the way she has since she was small, watched me sand a drawer front, and after a while spoke without looking at me, in the careful way that means a thing has been sitting on a young person too long. Grandpa, can I ask you something weird? I told her always. Are you sick? In your head. Her jaw was tight. Mom keeps telling people you're not doing well. And she and Uncle Ryan were on the computer with a word up in a tab, and I looked it up after. She turned to me, eyes wet and furious in a way only the young can manage. Conservatorship. It's when a judge decides a person can't take care of themselves, so somebody else controls all their money and everything they own. Why would they look that up? You're fine. You're completely fine. I kept sanding, because my hands needed something to do while the rest of me went cold. This was a different animal than a form at a kitchen table. This was a courtroom, a judge, the one road that doesn't need my signature, because it doesn't ask me anything. It needs only a doctor and a story, and they've been building the story for weeks in Carla's notes and Ryan's invented neighbors. I told Emily that grown people worry in strange and clumsy ways, that I was perfectly well, and that she'd done nothing wrong. I asked her to keep it between us, not to make her carry a secret, but because I couldn't protect her if her mother learned she'd talked. She nodded like a soldier taking an order, then hugged me hard, the way she used to at 7, and something in me that had gone cold and strategic softened for her as long as her arms were around me. Then I let it harden again, because I needed it hard. The next morning Ryan called, too casual by half, to ask whether I'd had a chance to look over those papers. I said they seemed complicated, and that I thought I might have a lawyer read them first. The line went quiet, only for a second, but I heard him recalculating on the other end. "A lawyer?" he said. "Sure. Which one? Maybe I'll come along. You know, so you don't get turned around by all the legal talk." And there it was. He had begun to suspect that his slow, tired, confused old father might not be so confused after all. I'd tipped my hand by one word, and I knew at the moment it left my mouth, and I understood that men like Ryan don't wait once they hear the clock start ticking. He didn't. 3 days later, I sat down to move some savings into a new account across town, the way Patricia, and I had planned quietly, so no borrowed name could reach it. I logged in to check the balance, and the screen went white, then red. Access temporarily restricted. Please contact your branch. The man on the phone was polite and immovable. My account had been flagged for possible financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult on a concern raised by a family member, and certain functions were frozen while the bank reviewed it. He couldn't tell me who raised it. He could tell me it named diminished capacity and unusual activity. The unusual activity, I realized, was my own attempt to protect my own money. They'd reached the tools built to guard old men from thieves and aimed them at the old man, to guard the theft. I stood in my kitchen with the phone hot against my ear and felt close to despair. Because how does a man prove he's sound a system that reads every effort to defend himself as proof that he isn't? That night Carla came by with a casserole and a soft, sorrowful voice. She sat me down and told me the family had just been talking, and everyone agreed it would be easier, safer, if Ryan looked after the finances for a while, only until things settled. She talked to me the way you talk a man off a ledge. "Nobody's taking anything, Dad. We're protecting you. From yourself a little, if I'm honest." I asked her, very quietly, protecting me from what? She had no answer that held together, and I watched her realize it and decide it didn't matter. On her way out, she picked the green folder off my counter and slid it into her bag as if it had always been hers. I let her take it. I'd photographed every page days before. I won't pretend I stood strong through all of it. That week was the low country of the whole thing. I sat in Ellen's chair with the frozen account and the file concern, and that word circling overhead like whether that wouldn't break. And more than once I thought about simply letting them have it. Sign the papers. Hand Ryan the checkbook. Keep the peace. And keep my children, even at the cost of my own dignity. What is a house against being alone at 63, with Ellen gone? One evening I picked up the phone to call Ryan and tell him yes, and I want to be honest about how close my thumb came to that number. What stopped me was Nathan, in my doorway, late, unable to look at me. He came in, sat, and turned his cap around in his hands the way he did as a boy when he'd broken something and come to say so. "Dad, I have to tell you something, and once I say it, I can't be the person who didn't." It spilled out of him unevenly. The reason they'd all been talking money that Sunday was that Ryan had come to the family weeks earlier in a panic. Real trouble. His business had borrowed against equipment he no longer owned, and he'd signed something with the words personal guarantee in it, which meant the debt wasn't the company's. It was his house, his name. There were people expecting a number by the end of summer that he did not have and could not raise. Selling my duplex, listing my house, getting his name on my accounts. It wasn't greed in the abstract. It was a drowning man reaching for the nearest solid thing, and the nearest solid thing was a father. He told us you'd want to help, Nathan said. He said if you knew, you'd just give it to him anyway, so this was only faster. Cleaner. He made it sound almost decent. He pressed his knuckles against his mouth. It's not decent. I heard him on the phone with Carla say that if you got difficult, they'd go the court route. I didn't even know what that meant until Emily told me about the word she saw. I sat there and understood two hard things at once. That Ryan was not a monster. He was a frightened man doing a monstrous thing, which is somehow worse, because you cannot hate a frightened man cleanly. And that Nathan, by walking through my door, had chosen me, laden afraid and imperfect, but truly. Why now? I asked him. Because he told me it's tomorrow. Nathan's voice broke on the word. Tomorrow morning, he's meeting somebody to start the court paperwork. He said once it's filed, you can't really fight it, that they just need a doctor and a story about you forgetting things. He looked up at me. He's not asking you to sign anything anymore, Dad. He's done asking. I thanked my son. I did not weep, though I wanted to, not from sorrow, but from something closer to relief that one of three had turned out to be the boy I raised. I told him to go home and behave exactly as he had been, to say nothing, to trust me a few days. He asked what I would do. I told him the truth. I didn't fully know yet, but I knew who to ask, and I was finished pretending to be less than I am. I called Patricia before 8 the next morning and gave her all of it, the frozen account, the file concern, the meeting Ryan was walking into that very day. She listened without interrupting, which I've come to understand is what competence sounds like, then said one sentence that put the floor back under my feet. They're moving fast because fast is all they have. A conservatorship isn't a form somebody signs in a hallway. It's a case. It takes a petition, notice to you, a hearing, evidence a judge will actually weigh. And a case can be lost by the very people who bring it, if the man they're calling incompetent turns out to be the most organized person in the room. We spent that morning in her office, and for the first time in weeks, I was making moves instead of covering for the ones being made against me. She laid out what a sound man of 63 can do, lawfully, in a matter of days, once he stops being polite about it. First, capacity, because everything rested on it. She sent me that afternoon to an independent geriatrician, not my regular doctor, whose notes Carla had been quietly seeding, but a specialist who does formal cognitive evaluations for exactly these fights. 2 hours of questions and drawing clocks and repeating lists back in order, and I walked out with signed, dated reports stating I was of sound mind and fully able to manage my affairs. Ryan wanted a doctor and a story. Now I had a doctor and the truth in writing, and I had it first. Second, the money. Patricia sent me straight to the bank's branch manager, a woman named Delgado, and I sat across her desk with a capacity letter and 40 years of history at that institution, and asked her to show me who had filed the concern and who had been added as deputy on my box. Her face changed as she read. The deputy was Ryan, added the same March week my name was forged in the vault. The concern that froze my account had been filed by Carla. With the doctor's letter in front of her, Ms. Delgado lifted the restriction, removed both my children from every access they gathered, and helped me open new accounts at the bank across town. I changed every password, every login email, the phone number, all of which, I discovered, had quietly become Ryan's. Third, the property, which Patricia handled with the most care, because it had to be clean. Nothing clever. Nothing done in the dark, or they'd wave it in court and call it the behavior of a confused man. So we did the plain, lawful, unglamorous thing. In front of notary, I revoked, in writing, every power of attorney I might ever have signed, a blanket revocation, filed and dated. So any sign one Ryan produced was dead on arrival. I signed a new, valid power of attorney and healthcare directive naming the one person I trusted, and I'll come to who that was. And I confirmed the duplex in the house both stood exactly as Ellen, and I intended, clear title, my will the only thing that spoke for them. Fourth, and this piece was mine, not the lawyer's. Evidence. My photographs of every page. The The bank's own records of the forged signature, the added deputy, the concern with Carla's name on it, Betty Kramer, who'd say to anyone that Ryan asked her to break a lease for a sale I never authorized, Nathan and Emily, though I'd sooner cut off my hand than put either on a witness stand. I organized all of it like a job file, in order labeled, so when the moment came I could lay on a table and let it speak without my voice ever climbing. Patricia asked whether I meant to press charges. Forging my name at the bank alone was a crime. She reminded me, a real one. I told her not yet. I told her there was one thing I needed to do first, and it wasn't legal, it was a father's. Before I decided what my children deserved, I needed to see, with my own eyes, which of them would stop when they believed no one who mattered was watching the cost. So I built a room they would all have to walk into. I called each of them myself, warm and vague, the tired old man they expected. They'd been right, I said. I'd thought hard about my age and about letting them help, and it was time to get my affairs in order, together, as a family. I wanted all three at the house that Sunday to sign the papers and settle things. I told Nathan to come too. I even asked Carla to bring the green folder, since she'd been kind enough to keep it safe. I could hear Ryan smiling through the phone. He thought Sunday was a finish line, that his worn-down father had gone smooth and agreeable, that he'd leave with a signature and a listing in his debt buried where no one would dig. He grew careless, told me not to bother with a lawyer, that he'd bring a friend and notarize on the spot. I told him that sounded perfect. Then I called Patricia and asked her to wait in my kitchen that Sunday until I called her in. I asked Nathan to come early. I laid my file out on the dining table, in order, set 6 chairs, and left the porch light off so the house would look as ordinary as it always had. I did not sleep that night either, but it was a different kind of not sleeping. The kind you do the night before the job finally gets done. They came at 2, Ryan first, with a leather folio and a man he introduced as a buddy who does notary work, who set a stamp down on my table like he was already on the clock. Carla next, the green folder in her bag, her smile working hard to do a job her eyes had quit. Nathan came in behind them, early as I'd asked, and took the chair closest to mine. Emily wasn't there. I'd told Carla to leave her out of grown-up business, and for once in that whole miserable season Carla and I had agreed on something. Ryan didn't waste a minute. He spread his pages across the table, squared them with 2 fingers, and slid the pen toward me the way you slide a check across to a man you've already beaten. "We kept it simple, Dad," he said. "Everything in one place. Like we always talked about. You sign today, my buddy here notarizes, and you never have to carry any of it again." I picked up the pen. I turned it over once, the way I had the night he first tried this, and I set it back down. Before I signed anything, I said, "Let me show you something. You know I've never been able to leave a job half-finished." I brought my folder to the table, not a lawyer's briefcase. A carpenter's folder, the kind I keep receipts in, labeled in my own block letters. I did not raise my voice. I've never had to raise my voice to be heard in my own house. I laid the first page down in front of Carla. A doctor saw me last week. A specialist. 2 hours of testing. This is I'm of sound mind and fully able to manage my own affairs. It's signed and it's dated. I thought you should have the first look, since you've been so worried about my memory. The color left her face by degrees, the way it does when a person recognizes their own handwriting coming back at them. I set down the second page. This is from the bank. On the 9th of March, someone opened my safe deposit box and signed my name to do it. That's my name. That is in my hand. I laid the deputy record beside it. And this is the man who quietly made himself a deputy on that box last winter and never once mentioned it to me. I looked at my oldest son. "It has your name on it, Ryan." He started to talk. I raised one finger, the way I used to when they were small, and had just learned to talk over the truth. "I'm not finished." I laid down the 3rd page. This is a concern somebody filed that froze my accounts. The bank wouldn't tell me who. The manager could, Once I sat down in front of her with that doctor's letter. I turned to Carla. It was filed by you. The notary friend had begun sliding his stamp back into his bag, having worked out that he'd walked into something that would follow him home. Sit down, I told him, not unkindly. You'll want to know what you nearly put your seal on. I laid the last 2 pages down together. The transfer on death draft, my name begun in a stranger's blue ink, and the power of attorney Ryan had spread on this very table. The date typed 3 days before he'd ever carried it through my door. Then I raised my voice, the only time I did that afternoon, just enough to carry to the next room. Patricia! She came in from the kitchen with her own folder and took the 6th chair. She told them who she was, and then she told them, in plain words, what she had already filed on my behalf, a written revocation of every power of attorney I might ever have signed, which made the page under Ryan's thumb worthless before he printed it, a new one, and a health care directive, naming the single person I trusted, confirmation that the house and the duplex stood exactly as Ellen and I had left them, and would pass by my will and by nothing else. Then she set a photograph of the forged signature, card in the middle of the table, and let it lie there. Forging a signature to enter a safe deposit box is a crime, she said, evenly. Filing a false report to freeze an older man's money is another one. I prepared the paperwork for both. Mr. Howerin hasn't yet decided whether to file it. That's the only thing left in this room that hasn't been decided. The quiet after that was the loudest thing I'd heard since the event. Ryan reached for the shape of a defense first. He'd only been protecting the family. The neighborhood was turning. The duplex was a headache. I wasn't as sharp as I'd been, and somebody had to think ahead. He said the word confused one more time, and this time it fell into a room that had just watched the doctor disagree with him in writing. Stop, I said, not because I'm angry, because I already know why, and the why is worse than a lie. I told him I knew about the guarantee, the equipment he no longer owned, the number due by the end of summer. The fight went out of him, and something honest rose in its place, the way water finds a low spot in a floor. I went into the box looking for the will. He said at last, not to me, to the table. I needed to know if you'd cut me out. For the business. For what I already owed you. I told myself that if I was still in it, taking it a little early wasn't really stealing. It was just sooner. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. Mom's rosary was lying on top of everything. I moved it to reach underneath. I told myself she'd understand. And the will, I asked, I never read it. His voice broke clean in half. There was a letter folded with it, sealed, your name on the front, in her writing. I couldn't. I put it back the way I found it. I had not known that letter existed. I have it now. I've read it more times than I'll say. It's short. Near the end, she wrote, take care of your father the way he took care of you, and never once let him feel like a burden for still being here. My son held that envelope in his hands in the middle of taking everything from me, and could not bring himself to open it. I've decided that is the truest thing I know about him. It doesn't undo a single thing he did. It's only enough to tell me he isn't empty. Then I told him how it would be, and I did not ask. The house and the duplex were mine, and would stay mine as long as I lived, and would be settled by the will Ellen and I made, which I had no intention of showing anyone at that table. Every account was closed to all of them. Nathan held my power of attorney now and my health directive, not because he was owed it, but because he was the one who walked through my door when it cost him something to do it. Nathan looked up sharply. I saw he hadn't known until that second either. Ryan would sign an acknowledgment of the money he'd borrowed from me years back, on a schedule Patricia would hold and enforce. I would not be paying his personal guarantee, and I said so to his face. A man who reaches for his father's house to cover his own name does not get the house. He gets the chance to do the hard, slow thing and climb out honestly. Whether he took it was up to him. To Carla I said the hardest sentence of the afternoon, because there was no crime in it, only a daughter. You told strangers I was losing my mind so you could take what wasn't yours yet. I don't know how to sit in a room with that. So for a while, I'm not going to try. She wept. I did not go to her. There are tears a person has to carry the whole way themselves, or they never learn to set the thing down. They left before dark, the way they had that first Sunday, only quieter. This time I did not sink into Ellen's chair and talk myself out of what I'd heard. I knew exactly what I'd heard. I had written it all down. In the weeks that followed, the shape of my life came back to me, changed. The court petition Ryan had been driving toward was never filed. There was nothing left to build it on, and his own lawyer, I'm told, urged him to walk away from it quickly. The freeze on my old account lifted the day Ms. Delgado read the doctor's letter. I kept the new accounts across town anyway. Some doors, once you learn other hands can open them, you're glad to leave shut behind you. I chose not to press the charges. I'll be honest that it wasn't forgiveness. It was a different kind of arithmetic. A trial would have put Emily in a hallway outside a courtroom and Nathan on a stand against his own brother, and I was not willing to spend the two of them to punish the other two. Patricia keeps the paperwork in a drawer, signed and ready. Ryan knows it's there. That knowledge turns out to be its own kind of fence. An offense was all I ever really wanted. The duplex still stands. Betty and Frank are still downstairs, and when I mended the porch step over there in the fall, Betty brought me lemonade and asked not one question, which is its own kind of grace. The rent still comes on the first. It still isn't doing nothing. It's doing exactly what Ellen and I built it to do, which is see to it that I never have to hold my hand out to anyone. Ryan makes his payments. They arrive on time, and I've decided to read them as a letter. He's writing me 1 month at a time, since he can't yet say it in words. We are not what we were. We may never be again. But twice now he's come by to help me carry lumber, and worked in silence at my side, and left without a word about money, and I have let him. That is the whole of it for now. Cautious is not the same as cold. Carla and I did not speak for 4 months. Then a card came on Ellen's birthday, a day she knew I'd be sitting with. It carried no apology. She isn't there yet, and I've stopped needing people to be further down the road than they are. But she signed it with the name she called me when she was small, and I wrote her back. We are cordial now, careful, like two people who share a history and a bruise. Her husband's boat is up for sale. I didn't ask why. Some prices you can let a person pay without narrating them. Nathan comes for supper on Sundays. He carries my power of attorney the way you carry something breakable up a staircase, and he has never once used it, and I believe he understands that not needing to is the point of it. He's the only one who knows where the will is kept. He has never asked what's in it. That, more than anything, is why it's him. Emily started at the State University in the fall. There's a fund with her name on it now, set up clean, in daylight, with Patricia's hand on the paperwork. Money that can only ever move in one direction. She calls on Sunday nights to tell me about her classes, and once, quietly, she asked whether she'd done the right thing, telling me about the word she found in that tab. I told her she was the reason I still own the house I'm sitting in. I heard her go still on the line, the way the young do when they realize they mattered. People will tell you the hardest thing is being betrayed by your own children. It isn't. The hardest thing is deciding you won't let it turn you into something small and suspicious, and clench for whatever years you have left. I chose my children the day each of them was born, and I did not stop choosing them the afternoon I heard them carve me up over coffee. But loving a person has never once meant handing them the keys to your life and calling it peace. That isn't love. That's surrender wearing love's coat. I'm 63. I intend to be a nuisance for a good while yet. I still climb the ladder, though I tell Nathan I don't. I still keep Ellen's rosary in the box, in the front corner, coiled the way she left it, and the porch rail, the one I went down to the workshop for that Sunday, the reason I was standing over that vent at all. I true it myself now. It's level. I checked. No Shanae finished.